The street was almost empty. The kind of quiet that made every sound carry farther than it should. Wind moved between the buildings, not loud, but sharp enough to make people tuck their hands deeper into their pockets. The dim glow of streetlights stretched across wet pavement, turning small patches of water into pale reflections. Keanu stood near the corner, motionless except for the slow, steady movement of his breath. He wasn't in a rush. He never was. But tonight, the cold reached him in a way he rarely noticed. He had been there for over an hour, leaning against the same wall, his dark coat zipped to the top, hands in his pockets. Every now and then, someone passed by, looking at him with curiosity, but he didn't move. He wasn't waiting for a ride. He wasn't lost. He was there for a reason, and that reason was inside the small theater across the street. Inside, Ana de Armas had been sitting alone in the back room for almost the same amount of time. She had walked off stage after a difficult scene. The crew had gone on break, but she hadn't moved from her chair. The warmth in the room felt heavy, like it wasn't letting her breathe. She could hear faint voices outside the door, but she stayed where she was, elbows on her knees, fingers pressed together. Earlier that evening, she had thought she was ready. The script wasn't new. The scene wasn't impossible. But something had shifted. Every line felt heavier. The lights felt hotter. The space felt smaller. The director had given her a break, telling her to take her time. She had nodded, but she didn't know what she was waiting for. And across the street, Keanu did. He had heard from someone on set that Ana had gone quiet after the scene. Not upset, not angry. Just quiet. Too quiet. He knew that silence. He had lived in it before. When people told him he needed time, what they really meant was they didn't know what to say. Sometimes the only thing that helped was knowing someone was close, even if they didn't speak. So he came. He didn't text her. He didn't call. He just put on his coat, walked into the cold, and stood where he knew she would see him if she looked out the window. Time passed, but neither of them moved. She stared at the floor, feeling the weight of the night pressing on her shoulders. He stared at the theater door, knowing that the only thing he could offer her was patience. A car passed, its headlights catching the side of his face. The light was gone as quickly as it came. But in that moment, Ana finally glanced up toward the window. She saw him. For a second, she didn't move. She didn't even blink. The glass between them made the world feel distant. She could barely see the small signs of cold on his face, the way his breath curled in the air. But she knew what it meant for him to be there without saying anything. And something inside her shifted. She stood. Her steps toward the door were slow at first, like each one was a decision she had to make twice. The crew outside the room looked at her but didn't speak. She pushed open the heavy door that led to the street and the cold rushed in. Keanu turned his head slightly, not surprised, not forcing a smile. He just looked at her in the way someone does when they've been waiting for you without a single doubt that you would come. For a moment, they didn't speak. The cold was between them, and so was something warmer. She stepped closer, her voice quiet. "You didn't have to wait," she said. "I know," he answered. "But I wanted to." The wind moved again, but it didn't feel as sharp. She realized she had left her coat inside, but she didn't care. She was here, and so was he. And sometimes, that was enough. This was only the first step, but neither of them knew how much this night would matter in the days ahead. The night didn't move quickly after that. They didn't rush to fill the air with words, because both knew words could be fragile in moments like this. They walked slowly down the street, past closed shops and dim cafe windows, their footsteps finding a quiet rhythm on the wet pavement. Ana's hands were tucked into her sleeves. She wasn't shaking, but Keanu noticed she kept drawing her shoulders in, as if trying to protect herself from more than the cold. He didn't press her. Instead, he matched her pace, just a step beside her, close enough for her to know he wasn't going anywhere. "Was it a bad day?" he asked finally. His voice was calm, low. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, not bad, just heavy." He nodded. "Those are the ones that stay with you. They don't shout, but they don't leave." They reached a bench under a streetlight. It wasn't the kind of bench people chose in winter, but they both stopped. The light above was pale, almost soft. Keanu sat first, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Anna sat beside him, her eyes on the street. "You ever feel like you're doing everything right?" she said slowly, "but somehow it still feels like you're not enough?" Keanu didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the dark space between the buildings. "All the time," he said finally. "More than I can count." She turned her head slightly toward him. "And what do you do?" "I keep going," he said. "Not because I'm sure I can fix it, but because if I stop, the weight wins. Sometimes it's not about winning or losing. It's about outlasting the moment." Anna let his words sit in the air. She thought about how many times she had carried that same quiet doubt, but never told anyone. A car passed by slowly, its tires slicing through shallow water, breaking the stillness for just a second. When it was gone, the silence felt different, less empty, more shared. "I almost didn't come outside," she admitted. "I didn't want anyone to see me like that." "Like what?" he asked. "Small," she said. "Like I couldn't hold it together." Keanu turned to face her fully. "There's nothing small about feeling. It's not weakness to stop for a second. It's not weakness to let someone wait for you." Her eyes dropped to the ground. She didn't say it out loud, but something in her chest loosened. She realized she hadn't been afraid of being seen. She had been afraid of being seen and not understood. But Keanu understood. A soft wind moved through again, carrying with it the faint smell of rain still trapped in the streets. She could see her breath now, curling in the cold light, and she thought about how strange it was that even in this weather, the presence of another person could make you feel warmer. "Where would you be right now if you weren't here?" she asked suddenly. He smiled a little. "Probably here anyway." She gave him a quiet look that wasn't quite a smile, but it was closer than before. Neither of them noticed the time slipping by. Minutes stretched into something slower, easier. People passed at a distance, wrapped in their own nights, and the two of them stayed on that bench like the rest of the city could wait. Anna didn't know it yet, but this night was going to come back to her in the days ahead, whispering in moments when she felt the cold return, reminding her that sometimes someone will stand outside for you, and they won't leave until you're ready to step into the night with them. The quiet between them was steady now, almost comfortable. But the night wasn't done with them. As they sat on the bench, a low hum began to drift from the far end of the street. It wasn't loud at first, but it grew, carried by the cold air. A motorcycle. Its headlight appeared, cutting through the dim yellow glow of the street lamps. The rider slowed as he approached, glancing at the two figures on the bench. Anna didn't notice at first, her eyes fixed on the cracks in the pavement. Keanu's gaze, though, shifted slightly, his posture straightening just enough to signal he had seen. The bike came to a stop a few meters away. The rider pulled off his helmet, a man with a rough face, eyes that didn't bother to hide their judgment. "You're Keanu Reeves," the man said flatly, his voice not carrying awe, only recognition. "And you're Anna, right?" Anna nodded slightly, unsure where this was going. The man's smile was small but sharp. "Guess Hollywood's colder than it looks, huh? Sitting out here like the rest of us." Keanu stayed calm. "Just talking," he said. The man's gaze flicked between them, lingering a second too long on Anna. "Sure, talking." He gave a slow, knowing nod, but it wasn't friendly. Anna's fingers tightened inside her sleeves. She could feel the judgment in his tone, like he was trying to turn their quiet night into a story that wasn't theirs. Keanu didn't raise his voice, didn't let frustration leak into his words. "Some things don't need to be explained," he said simply. The man looked at him for a moment, then back at Anna, as if weighing whether to push further. But something in Keanu's steady gaze made him stop. He put his helmet back on, the visor hiding his face. The engine roared, and he was gone. Anna let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Does that happen a lot?" she asked. "More than you'd think," Keanu replied. "But the way I see it, you can't control what people think. You can only control how you carry yourself when they think it." She looked at him, the faint streetlight catching the lines of his face. He didn't seem shaken, only more grounded. "You didn't even flinch," she said. "Flinching doesn't make the cold any warmer," he said with a slight smile. "Besides, not every moment needs a reaction. Sometimes letting things pass is the strongest thing you can do." She thought about that as the silence returned. It wasn't the same as before. There was something sharper under it now. A reminder that the world outside their small circle could interrupt at any time. And yet, as they sat there, she realized she wasn't afraid of those interruptions as long as he was next to her. But she didn't know that the next one would come sooner than either of them expected. The street had gone quiet again, but it didn't feel as still as before. Anna kept glancing toward the end of the block, as if expecting someone else to come around the corner. Keanu noticed but didn't say anything. Instead, he leaned back against the bench, letting her know, without words, that they weren't in a hurry to move. Then, from somewhere behind them, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the silence. Sharp, quick, uneven. Not the calm pace of someone out for a walk. Anna turned first, her eyes narrowing slightly. A man was moving toward them from the opposite direction, wearing a worn hoodie pulled low over his head. His hands were deep in his pockets. As he came closer, his eyes flicked from Keanu to Anna. There was no recognition this time, no hint that he knew who they were, only a strange restlessness in his expression. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice tight. "You got the time?" Keanu glanced at his watch. "Almost 11. The man nodded slowly, but didn't walk away. "Cold night to be out." "It's not so bad," Keanu said. Anna felt her shoulders tense. There was something about the way the man lingered, standing just a little too close for comfort. "You live around here?" the man asked. Keanu kept his tone even. "Just passing through." The man's gaze shifted to Anna again. "You with him?" Anna's voice was calm, but she didn't answer his question directly. "We're talking." The man gave a short laugh, though it didn't sound genuine. "Must be a good talk to be worth standing in the cold." Keanu didn't move, but there was a subtle shift in his presence, something steady, deliberate. "Some conversations are worth more than comfort," he said. The man's eyes held on him for another moment, then flicked between them again. "Well, you two take care," he muttered, and finally walked away, disappearing into the shadows at the far end of the street. Anna let out a slow breath. "He was strange." Keanu nodded. "People carry all kinds of storms with them. Sometimes you can feel it before you see it." They sat for another moment before Keanu stood, motioning gently toward the cafe on the corner. "Come on, let's get warm." Inside, the air was thick with the smell of coffee and baked bread. They found a small table in the back, away from the window. Anna wrapped her hands around the cup the barista placed in front of her, letting the heat soak into her fingers. For a while, neither spoke. The outside world stayed just beyond the glass, but the quiet here was different, safer. "You didn't look nervous out there," Anna said finally. I was watching, Keanu replied. Not for what he said, but for what he might do. Sometimes you can calm a moment just by standing steady in it. Anna sipped her drink, thinking about how rare that was. To sit with someone who didn't fill silence with noise, who didn't need to rush through discomfort. And though she didn't know it yet, the real reason Keanu had stayed in the cold that night was about to become clear. Because there was something he hadn't told her, something that would make her see this night differently forever. The cafe felt warmer now, but it wasn't just from the heat. Anna sat across from Keanu, her coffee untouched for a while, watching the way his hands rested on the table. Calm, steady, no fidgeting. He seemed perfectly at home in stillness, as if the whole night had been planned just to sit here. But she knew it hadn't been planned. Keanu didn't work that way. So why had he come? Why had he waited for her in the cold without a word? After a few more minutes, she asked softly, Keanu, why were you really there tonight? He looked up, not startled, not even hesitant. Because I've been where you were, he said. I know what it's like to be in a room full of people and still feel like you're standing alone in the middle of nowhere. Her fingers tightened around the cup. You knew I was having a bad day? Someone told me you walked off set. They didn't know why, but I didn't need to know the details. Sometimes the reason doesn't matter. What matters is that someone shows up. She felt a lump rise in her throat. But you didn't have to wait outside. You could have texted. And what would I say? He asked gently. That I'm here if you need me? Those words are good, but they don't always feel real unless the person is actually there. She looked down, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. Were you worried I wouldn't come out? No, he said. I was ready for that. Sometimes people aren't ready to talk. But being ready to listen means you don't walk away just because they're not there yet. His words settled into her like warm water into cold hands. She thought about the hour he had stood outside, the sharp wind, the way he hadn't tried to rush her when she finally appeared. It wasn't just kindness. It was patience, the kind that didn't ask for anything in return. You've done that before, she said quietly, more like a statement than a question. He nodded. More times than I can count. For friends, for strangers, for people who never knew I was there. Sometimes you help without them ever knowing. Tonight was different. Tonight I wanted you to know. Anna felt the weight in her chest shift. She had been carrying her own quiet storm all evening, but now there was space in it, space made by someone else's steady presence. She wanted to say thank you, but the word felt too small. Instead, she asked, And what if I had stayed inside all night? Keanu gave the smallest smile. Then I'd still be out there. Silence followed, but it was warm, not heavy. She realized this was the part of kindness people rarely saw, not the grand gestures, but the decision to simply stay. Outside, the cold still owned the street, but in here, it no longer mattered. And yet, Anna knew their night wasn't over. There was still one more turn waiting for them, something that would test that quiet patience in a way neither of them could predict. The cafe had begun to empty. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as people left in twos and threes, pulling coats tight against the cold outside. The staff moved quietly, stacking cups, wiping tables. Anna and Keanu remained in their corner, the last untouched pocket of the night. Anna's coffee had gone lukewarm, but she didn't care. She wasn't holding it for the warmth anymore. She was holding it because letting go felt like moving on too soon, and she wasn't ready for this moment to end. Keanu glanced toward the window. The street outside was quiet again, except for the soft swirl of wind carrying tiny specks of frost in the air. We should head back soon, he said gently. She nodded, but neither of them moved. When they finally stepped outside, the cold hit them like a wall. Their breath came out in clouds, and the city's sounds felt distant, muffled by the frozen air. They walked side by side toward the theater, not rushing. Halfway there, Anna slowed. Keanu stopped too, watching her. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated. "It's not the scene tonight, it's everything. The noise, the pressure, people watching all the time. Some days I feel like I can't breathe without someone judging how I do it." Keanu listened, his expression open and steady. "And the worst part," she continued, her voice quieter, "is that I start believing them. I start thinking, maybe I really am not enough." Keanu waited until she looked at him. "I know that feeling," he said. "And I can tell you this, it's a lie. The problem isn't you. It's the weight people try to put on your shoulders without asking if you can carry it." She blinked, her eyes stinging from the wind, or maybe something else. "And what if I drop it?" "Then you let someone else carry it for a while," he said simply. "That's not weakness, that's trust." They kept walking, the theater drawing closer, its faint lights spilling into the street. When they reached the door, she stopped again, turning to him. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for tonight, for waiting. For staying when it would have been easier to leave." Keanu gave a small, almost shy smile. "It wasn't hard. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is just be where they can find you." She felt the words settle deep inside her, the kind of truth that stays long after a night ends. The door to the theater opened, letting out a burst of warm light and the faint sound of voices. But Anna didn't step inside right away. Instead, she looked back down the street where they had first seen each other that night, him standing in the cold, her behind the glass. She thought about how close she had come to never opening that door, and how different this night would have been if she hadn't. "You're right," she said finally. "Some moments are worth more than comfort." Keanu nodded. "And some people are worth waiting for." She smiled then, small but real, and together they stepped back into the light, leaving the cold behind. That night would not be remembered for the scene she struggled with, or the strangers who passed by, or even the cold itself. It would be remembered for the quiet truth they had both learned. That sometimes the kindest thing you can give someone is your time, and sometimes it's the only thing they need.